everyone, welcome back. Today I'm here with the incredible Debra Ruh over in Rockville, Virginia. For many of you, she will require no introduction, but for those of you who aren't aware of her work, she is a published author of 3 books. She's a branding expert, an entrepreneur. She is the host of a really popular video and podcast program called Human Potential at Work, which has an audience in 92 countries. She's the founder and CEO of Ruh Global Impact and the co-founder and executive chair of Billion Strong. What I find most amazing, everything that you do is amazing. But after 25 years working in baking as an executive, you started your first tech company, Tech Access, which is now this insanely successful, award-winning, multi-million-dollar company that employs 90% people who are living with a disability, which is, I think, just an incredible thing. So thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
I agree. It's so fun to get together, and it's also, isn't it? I don't know about you, but it's embarrassing whenever somebody's doing your bio. I think we all have to be careful not to buy into our own marketing. It's just been a work and purpose and passion, just like your work. I believe, and I know you're the same way, and probably your audience is, that we're all stronger together, and we got to do what we can to make a difference. We have to. I think it's very clear right now than ever before.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this channel. You and I were talking about this a bit before. It's such a great community of people here coming together and helping each other out to achieve things that are much harder to achieve on our own. And you also are a crazy impressive influencer. For those of you watching, Debra has an audience of over 450,000 people across her social spaces. Just really amazing. So how did you get here? Where did your passion for all of this come from?
It actually started when my first child was born, my daughter. I will be honest with you. As I was giving birth to her, I remember looking at her and a little weird thought floated through my head. Wow, she looks like she has Down syndrome, which it was an interesting thought because, to be honest, I didn't even know what that meant. I forgot about that little floating thought. Went on 4 months later, the doctors told us that our daughter had Down syndrome. It really started then because once again, I was blessed in a way to find out that my daughter had Down syndrome at 4 months, because a lot of times you will find that out right at birth after you've already given birth to your child, which can be, painful, and your hormones are all, and so I actually had time to actually get to know my daughter for 4 months. And then they told me she's broken, and I didn't buy it. No, she's not. No, she's not. And so instead of people embracing me and saying, congratulations, you're a beautiful baby girl, it was like pity and, oh, we're so sorry, your life's going to be, and it really, I did not like that. And so first of all, what I did was I just didn't want people to notice she had Down syndrome. Yeah. So then, of course, as you work it all out, you're like, wait a minute. Stop this. My daughter has value, and she adds great value to society, and she's been a great teacher to me and still is. So I would say that was really where I started. A mother with a cause. Get out of the way, right? But
And I'd like to thank Aura for sponsoring this video. Aura is an all-in-one online safety tool for your entire family. Aura has an easy-to-use interface to monitor essential financial vulnerabilities, such as bank accounts and identity theft records. It's simple to use, and its features include financial fraud and credit protection. Aura keeps you a step ahead of threats with credit monitoring and financial tools to help keep your assets safe. It has identity theft protection. They will alert you if they detect threats to your identity, accounts, and more. And they also have online and device security. So every Aura plan comes with intelligent safety tools such as VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more to protect your online privacy and data. I've actually been using Aura myself for quite a few months now, and I do definitely feel safer as a result. I appreciate all the alerts that I get, letting me know about any potentially suspicious activity that's happening with my accounts and my information online. With the link in the video description, you can enjoy a 14-day free trial, no obligations and no commitments. And if you do decide to continue, plans start as low as $14 per month.
But the thing that I do like about your audience, because I had you on my show, and my audience loved what you're doing. And I went out to your YouTube channel, and I was surprised at how engaged your audience was. It seems to me like they're more engaged than other channels that I see. So I just wanted to applaud you and your audience for that, because that's how we start to change things, right? Really engaging with each other.
Oh yeah, they are amazing, and I love that you've noticed that as well. It's almost every video I'm trying to encourage people, like, please, please, this is just one small piece of it. Like, we want to hear from you. Like, we're all coming together. I'm just one person. It's all of you that are making this happen. So it's an incredible thing for many of us that felt alone for a really long time to
Right.
see the power and the change that can happen when we join forces and we do this together. Yeah, it's amazing.
And when we stop deciding that people are less than for whatever reason, because you're living with chronic health issues, or my daughter with Down syndrome, she lives with chronic pain and has for years. And I was often talking about chronic pain on my show, and I didn't even realize for a while what my daughter was walking. She wasn't telling me, but also and I don't know why this happens, but with some people with Down syndrome, they seem to have a much higher tolerance for pain than others. Just for an example, I remember one time her dentist sent her to a special dentist, and she made some comment to me like one of her teeth or something needed to be pulled. So the other dentist walked in, the specialist, and he started looking, and he's like, okay, she's going to have 5 teeth removed. And I was like, what? And he was like, if this were you and I, we would be on the floor screaming in pain. Screaming in pain. He said, but she is just in a bad mood. So if you just think about that, right, that's intense.
Even just the term disability, I've been thinking a lot about this getting ready for this interview. And, I lived with an invisible chronic illness for about 10 years, as you might know, before recovering. And during that time, I never thought of myself as having a disability. I didn't think I had any right for any kind of, accommodation or accessibility. And in fact, I went out of my way to make sure people didn't know, especially in the workplace, right or wrong. This might have just been my perception, but I worked really hard to make sure people did not know that I was dealing with this because I thought I would be discriminated against because of it. So this might seem like kind of a weird or obvious question, but what is disability? Is chronic illness in there? What does that mean?
It's a shame that we have to ask that question, but it's actually a really good question. And also, what you did was protect yourself, because what you can't do is go in and tell anybody the truth, or you're going to be discriminated against possibly, or somebody's going to decide you're broken, you're not good enough. We're all struggling with that anyway. Women, we struggle with it. I mean, everybody. I don't care who you are, what lived experiences you have. I think we all can identify with pieces of that. But the reality is, if you have chronic health issues or you're in chronic pain, you actually are part of the community of people with disabilities. I remember one time somebody asked me in a speech, what do you think is the biggest problem for people with disabilities? And I said, well, our biggest problem is that nobody wants to be part of our community. If they are part of our community, they want to hide, like the example I gave with my daughter, or they're afraid to admit they're part of our community because they do not want to be disenfranchised any more than they probably already have been. The reality is we still have not come up with a good answer for that as society. I created, and you know this, a new nonprofit called billion-strong.org. It's really sort of naive in a way, in that I'm trying to get us all to come together, the 1.7 billion people with lived experience with disabilities, when we don't even know we're part of the community. Diabetes, cancer, epilepsy, ALS, anybody with high anxiety or depression, you're part of our community. The problem is, once again, you want to be part of I'm not saying this, but a loser community. It's all messed up how we're allowing people to live their lives, and how we are discriminating against people and disenfranchising people because, for example, they're living with chronic health problems, or they have some really serious issues that they're dealing with in their home or as caregivers. That's something I think that we learned as society during COVID. When we say we want to be included because we don't want to be lonely and we don't want to be excluded, we want to have access to technology. Really, we're talking about all of us. All of us. We're talking about the intersections. We're talking about, I always find it interesting that women are the largest minority group in the world. Well, the reality is not right at this moment, but it shifts back and forth. But sometimes there are more women in the world than men. It's very close. Right now, actually, men are edging us out as we reach our 8 billion people as of November 15th. There are 8 billion people in the world. The problem, though, with women is that we're treated as a minority. we are not treated equally. We are not treated as maybe the majority. We are treated as a minority. And then you take the women in the intersections of that. Women that are part of the LGBT community, women that are brown and black, women that have a disability, or any of those pieces, right? And those people we find are disenfranchised more and more and more. A man, a Caucasian, a white man will make $1. You and I, as white women, Caucasian women, would generally make like 80 cents on that dollar. Now, if you have a visible disability that somebody can see, it's going to get a lot less. You're probably not even going to be employed, or you're underemployed. The intersections of all these pieces, I think that's what we all need to do. You have this engaged audience that are really talking about their lives and being included. And the reality is now we, I think, need to look at it a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger. Even here in the window, I have she, her, hers. Do I need to tell you that I identify as a woman? I don't necessarily, except I do it because I'm honoring the people in the world that feel their identity is not being really accepted. So I think that's where we are with all of this, the Me Too movements, the intersections. We all come together, and your part of the conversations are often not being heard. We need you in these conversations.
I'm excited to help further unite our communities. Right now, I'm working mostly on, people living with ME/CFS or long COVID, but that's just such a drop in the bucket.
Right.
And it seems like there's so much more power when all of us come together with, all these different lived experiences of disability, whether it be mental health or chronic pain or, whatever it might be. But what does that mean for us, really? When we join together, how does that impact our experience?
Well, and that's a great question. And this is what I would say. I'm going to say this is unfair, but what we're doing is we as society are asking our employers, our corporations, our governments, we are asking them to solve societal problems that have been created for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We colonized a lot of communities, for example. So now what's happening as we get together and expand these conversations and understand what does it mean to have a lived experience with chronic health, or what does it really mean, and how does that impact you as a parent, for example, or as an individual, or as an employee? So you have to look at all those intersections of you individually. So what we're finding now is that the major corporate brands, they are paying attention to us. They're paying attention for a couple of reasons. They're paying attention because, thank you, the younger generations are saying, we don't want to work for you if you're a bad corporation making things, hurting us. And you're seeing it with the great resignation. I just love it. And you're seeing the young people really step up and say, I don't care. If you're going to be doing that to women, I'm out of here. A lot of the social things that are happening, the demands that society is putting on the brands, the corporate brands, the employers, we can help further those conversations by continuing to come together, because all this stuff is happening. We know it. And you mentioned long COVID. As society, we're really scared about long COVID, right? We don't know what's going to happen to these beautiful people. Your conversation is going to continue to be more and more powerful because we don't know what's ahead of us. But what we do know is just because you're a human being and you might struggle with this or do this or have that, you're still valuable and you still add great value to society, and we still want you to part of it. I mean, I'm now to the point where I'm an older woman. I'm in my 60s. I'm obviously not even worth talking to anymore, because when you get old, you're worthless, even though maybe that's not true. Maybe there's some wisdom keeping there. It's just, I believe that I'm saying what everybody already knows, but the powers that be, the leaders, the corporate leaders, the CEOs, they are paying attention. And I'll give you an example. Paul Pullman, who is a very famous CEO, he was the CEO of Unilever, which is a gigantic corporation. When he retired, he really started working with the other CEOs to help them make a difference. He worked with Dr. Caroline Casey, who's blind, and the World Economic Forum to create the valuable 500. 500 corporations committed to true inclusion of people with disabilities like we've never seen before. But he also writes articles, and he wrote an article to CEOs saying, side with your employees, not the politicians. Side with your employees. If the majority of your employees want X, Y, Z, that you should side with your employees. And I hadn't heard anybody else say that. And it's so obvious to say that. Stand with your employees and we'll stand with you. So something is happening. And once again, communities like yours and ours, the more we come together, the more we really have impact. But I'm very optimistic about what's happening.
It's good to hear. If anyone has their finger on the pulse of all of this, it's you. So if you are optimistic, I am optimistic. You'd mentioned Billion Strong that you're a co-founder of, and that's originally how I became aware of your work. And it was actually during an interview with Martin Burial, which I know you know. For people watching, you might have seen his interview. He's amazing. He has a partner who is living with ME/CFS, and he's a composer, and he's putting together this whole gratitude concert, sharing stories of people with disability and chronic illness. He's like, you and Debra really need to be connected. And I just had a little laugh. I'm like, I agree. I'm like, I also think me and Oprah should be connected. I'm like, but you might be overestimating me here a little bit. So shout out to Martin to making this happen. But for people who aren't aware of Billion Strong, can you tell us a bit about what that is?
I created a technology company because I'm a technologist. Then I created Ruh Global Impact, and we're a for-profit social enterprise, and we work with gigantic corporations, helping them meaningfully include us. Okay, fine. But then I also was I help a lot of other people because this is what we're doing, right? This is how we change society. So the Valuable 500, which I'd mentioned, and you can find that at The Valuable 500. Founder of it, Dr. Caroline Casey, had come to me and told me what she was doing. And I'm like, I'm in, let me help you. And of course I help for free because it's not always about money passing hands, but at the same time, those of us doing social good, I'm tired of us not making money either. That's a whole nother change we want. But we want you to continue to do the work you're doing. And for you to be able to continue to do the work you're doing, you need funding. So people need to fund your show. We need to fund social work too. The Valuable 500, just such an interesting process because we were trying to get 500 major CEOs to the table to want to include people with disabilities. And that's impossible. We can't do it. Oh, we did it. So we drove all these CEOs of major corporations. You can see who they are by going to the Valuable 500. And it's wonderful. The World Economic Forum's included. Yay. Okay. But now we have to execute, because if we don't execute, if we don't help those 500 companies be successful, this could hurt the community of people with disabilities and all of our efforts. So I reached out to some of my customers and I was saying, what's your biggest concern? And they said, the biggest concern is we do not know where to find you. We don't know where to find people with disabilities. We know you're everywhere. You tell us you're everywhere, but 80% of you have invisible or hidden disabilities. And so, it's just a reality. Where do you find us? And if you're here in the United States, like I am, you are not allowed to ask me if I have a disability. Now, I'm going to actually tell you, I do have a disability. I'm neurodiverse, and I was diagnosed with ADHD in my 50s. And, okay, so I didn't realize I'm neurodiverse, and that also is part of the community. It's so gigantic. It's almost easier to say who isn't part of our community, because humans have abilities and disabilities, and we grow and we change and we shift and we lose our eyesight and our hearing as we get older. It's just, we're humans having a biological experience. When they said that, I of course I knew that, but I thought, you're right, and this might fail if we can't do a good job of coming together. So that's when I created billion-strong.org. It's the first organization in the world to focus on empowerment and pride for our community. Once again, we don't even know who's part of our community, but for anyone with chronic pain, anyone with chronic illness, anyone with a disability, anyone that has lived experience with disabilities as a parent, as a stakeholder, as an investor, if we all came together, I know we're not going to get everybody, but just think if we really came together en masse, we would have such a bigger voice. Now, the corporations are noticing this, and they are so excited, and they want to help fund. But what we're trying to do at Billion Strong is not duplicate what's being done. I don't want to create a podcast that talks about what you're doing. You're doing a great job with that. But what we do want to do is we want to highlight, for example, your work so others can find you. And so it is really a mirroring, a belonging organization, because if we could come together and show who we were, hire from each other, invest in each other, partner with each other, collaborate. Just think what we could do. So we have 94 country partners of organizations of persons with disabilities engaged. We have thousands of global advisors like you, and it's a free movement, and it is really just about trying to keep advancing society. Little issues that we want to take on, for example, caregivers. Well, that's something your audience knows about. We pay our caregivers horribly. We do not treat them as good professions. And if you're a family member, too bad. I know you can't go out and work because you've got to make sure your loved one is safe and supported. It's ridiculous. So that's things like we want to take on, because caregivers, for example, should be considered a professional career where you could get paid more than going to work for Taco Bell or McDonald's. We've got so many things that need to be addressed, but the reality is we address them better if we're together. So Billion Strong is a free movement, and we really need the numbers. We need everybody to join us. But we also we're going to have speaker bureaus, and we're going to help fund projects. It's going to be exciting.
Oh, absolutely incredible. And for those of you watching, it's linked in the video description. So I really encourage you just to take a minute to click on it and check out what's there, and just see how you can get involved. This is so powerful, everything that you're doing. I'm learning so much from you. The world is learning so much from you. I know that you have done work with the UN, and you had mentioned before we started recording something that I know very embarrassing little about, but the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and you talked about the importance of working together to implement them, and how do we ensure that society is meaningful about including diverse, and disenfranchised communities like, community of people with disabilities. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they're called, as you said, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they're the SDGs. So you'll see SDGs. And the United Nations got together with a lot of leaders all over the world and said, okay, we should all get together and we should work together on solving some of these big problems like, climate change, for example. And so as a world, we came up with 17 goals. They're goals like end poverty, gender equality, equal, fair and equal pay, decent work. But the one that I love, the 17th goal, I love that they did this goal. The 17th goal says we should all collaborate and work together in partnerships to make sure we achieve these goals. So when I'm talking to corporations, I'm always saying to them, what are y'all doing to make sure that the world is going to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals? Because of the 17, certainly all of them impact all of us, but 11 of them directly impact the inclusion of people with disabilities, because it really is about clean oceans, taking care of animals. It really tries to incorporate all the big things that we're working with as a world, but encourage us to come together to work on it. Not just from the perspective always of the global north or the west, but of the global south and of all of the world. We sometimes talk about developing countries like they're less than us, and developed countries was ridiculous. We all, I think, are developing right now and, working together. But I often say to the corporate brands I work with, we as society expect you to have good corporate social responsibility, good corporate digital responsibility. We want you focused on DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We all want tech for good, tech for all. So the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, really incorporate them all so that we can come together and be having the big conversations. Should you be having, when you're talking about health, chronic health, should you be also be concerned, for example, this is such a silly thing to say, but the environment, does that impact your part of the community? Yeah, you're living on the planet, but yeah.
So you had mentioned, I find this really surprising, that 80% of the people in the world who are living with some form of disability, it's an invisible illness or an invisible disability. So how do we come together when we don't even know who these people are? And, how do we work together when this is the case?
I think what we have to do is we have to first encourage people to be, willing to really talk about their identities. I know that when I was talking to a company in the United States, I was talking to a couple of people in their diversity group. And these people have lived experience with disabilities. And at one point they said, well, what is Billion Strong going to do to protect us if our employer disenfranchises or discriminates against us? And I said, that's not what Billion Strong was created for. There are plenty of groups, there are plenty of places to go if you're being discriminated against in the States, for example. But we are not at Billion Strong going to start suing companies, and we're just not going to do that. What we want to do is we want to celebrate who we are, encourage people to come out with their lived experience, and like you said, advocate, educate, and things like that. But we also want to really encourage Americans, for example. This is what I said to them, to be brave. Once we move outside some of these developing countries, these developed countries like UK, the US, Australia, things like that, things get really, really hard for our community, people with disabilities, whether it's visible or not. And sometimes when you have a disability that's visible, like my daughter with Down syndrome, if you can see, if my daughter's in the mall and you can look at my daughter, if you can see, and you can tell she has Down syndrome because she has classic Down syndrome features. So if she's walking and singing real loud, people would just smile at her. But if somebody with autism, for example, is doing that, it's not clear, and they're doing that, people are just going to, be looking at them and, and not understanding why these people are acting inappropriately, for example. So the understanding that so many of us have to actually express in some way that we're part of this community and really own that, 80% of us, that's significant numbers. But we also have a problem with identities in that sometimes, even within our own community, you're not disabled enough, or your disability doesn't matter because I have to tell you I'm neuro. So there's some of that constant infighting between different groups at the same time, just being honest about it. So I think we haven't solved these things, but I think the way we solve them is by having conversations like we're having right here and pointing out to people they are part of that community. And the more we can come out and identify, that you're not broken, but the more I think we can come out and talk about our stories and talk about what's happening, and also understanding things like, I don't know why it's all 80, but also when you look at people with disabilities, our community, only 20% of them, like my daughter, are born with a disability. My daughter was born with a chromosome, an extra chromosome. That's who she is who she's always been. But my husband, sadly, my husband that passed, my husband was hit by a car when he was a child, and it killed him. And luckily they were able to revive him, and he was in a coma, and he didn't go back to school for months, blah, blah. But I did not realize that when I married my husband, he had a disability. I just never thought about it. I didn't even realize I was already, part of this community. So I think it always goes back to like things we're doing here. We're going to have to keep talking about it, educating. And then also I think we got to be brave, and we got to stand up and say, I'm not broken because I'm a mother of a child with Down syndrome, and I'm not broken because I have ADHD. I'm actually more focused and more determined to make a difference because of those things. So as Greta Thunberg once said, when somebody was making fun of her autism, well, it's my superpower. So I think that's where we are now. What's your superpower?
And it's so true. And of all the people I've interviewed, most of us, all of us, have gone through some version of hell, but come out the other side of it. These are some of the most incredible humans I've ever met in my life, really just come out like superhumans on the other side of it. Just so enlightened, so knowledgeable, so informed, so empathic, just so much more confident, so much more at peace. It really has helped them to become this whole new incredible version of themselves. So, it's understandable to think of it like a fault or a deficit.
Right.
But for the vast majority of us, it is anything but. So when you include people who have gone through these sorts of growth boot camp experiences, you are sort of including superhumans. It's so important. I love what you're doing just to change that mindset.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think, for years I didn't talk about this, and I didn't want anybody to know. Honestly, I was embarrassed and I was ashamed, and it felt like a defect or a personality flaw, or somehow it was my fault, or it made me less than. I just didn't want it associated with my identity. And then I did a total 180. And now if you Google me, I've Googled me, I know, like I'm like chronic fatigue syndrome girl. That's all you like. So I've completely changed my mindset on that. But when you do that, and so many other people tell me the same thing, and it's scary, so scary, at least it was for me at first, to really speak about this. Mm-hmm. But it's incredibly not just liberating, but it just, you notice this ripple effect all around you of how it gives other people permission, that vulnerability for them to speak up as well. Because now so many people come to me with things that I don't think they ever would have had I not spoken up. So I know it can be scary, and I feel like I don't know if this is something I want to speak publicly about, or it doesn't have to be on YouTube. It can just be to your friends, to your neighbor, to your boss.
Right. I agree. I'm going to tell you just a really quick story. You were mentioning some of my business successes. Well, you know what? Anybody that's worked really hard, I've had a lot of successes, and boy, I've had a lot of failures. Oh, a lot of mistakes. Oh, so many. And I remember when my company Tech Access got in trouble because it was doing really well, but the financial crisis came, took my bank out. My little bank in Virginia was one of the first to go down, even though they had nothing to do with it. But I was interviewed by a reporter after all this. It was so hard, right? You said so hard. I was interviewed by a reporter, and they did a piece on me. And one of my friends read the piece, and he said, "Okay, Debra," he said, "I'm sure it was lethargic for you to say those things you said in, that article." Mm-hmm. He said, "But don't tell anybody else now." He said, "You've admitted it. Don't tell anybody else. I don't want people to judge you because you failed." And I said, "You know what? I think I'm going to have to talk about it, because what I see, especially as a woman, is I see all these other people, at the time men, they just seemed to get how to be an entrepreneur and how to get your cash flow right and how to get everything right. And I was just stupid and didn't know how to do anything. And so what I realized is that wasn't true. That wasn't true at all. It's just a lot of us don't speak up about our truth. And so the truth is, it's hard to do it. You've got to fight for it. You're going to make mistakes. But we also, I think, have to be authentic enough to talk about it, because it is hard. But so what? It's worth it. But I don't want you to think that it was so easy for me that you're just stupid, that you can't figure it out, because that's what we've been doing. I just think it's really important that we stop doing that to each other, that we stop lying about our journeys, making it seem like it was a little bit easier than it was, only because you don't know what somebody else is walking. And I just think we got to be kinder and share and engaged, and really care about what other communities are walking at the same time. So once again, that's why I love your community and the engagement of it, because that's where society's changing.
So for people who are watching this right now, what can they do? How can they get involved? How can they find out more about what their rights are? How can they, if they're feeling alone in this, how can they come together? What's a good place to start?
Well, I would love for y'all to join the free movement on Billion Strong, www.billion-strong.org. And that is a good place to start, because what we want to do is we want to tell your stories. We want to take your podcast and we want to put it out there so people can find it, and we want to categorize it. So it really is a place that we just want to come together and have these conversations. Once again, we'll have speakers bureaus. We're going to have certified business owners. We want to look at all the intersections. We want to support the LGBTQIA community. We want to follow the lead of the LGBTQIA community, for example, in that the reason why they have so many words is because those words were used to hurt that community. So they're trying to take their words back. Well, we're going to do the same thing with the disability community. So it would be such a blessing for y'all to join us, to tell us what you're doing, to continue to engage on your community, engage on our community, come together, but also try to really be authentic about your life, because you don't know, not only are you going to help yourself, but you're going to help others be true to their life too. And you're going to help the children to understand, no, it is okay to be a human being. It is okay. And one thing that gives me hope is I interview a lot of younger adults than me that have lived experience with disabilities or chronic health, and what I'm starting to hear is they did really well as they were growing up, and that they were really accepted by their community and their peers. And of course, once they got to adulthood, transition age, things fell apart, and it's horrible. We got so much work to do, but I'm sort of hopeful that at least we're seeing more positive childhood experiences by people with disabilities. So maybe we're making progress, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Well, that's inspiring that these are the generations that are coming up. So to me, that suggests that even better things are ahead. And for those of you watching, everything, of course, will be in the video description for Billion Strong, for Ruh Global Impact, for her podcast, Human Potential at Work. Everything for Debra to follow her, find her, and learn more is all there. So I really encourage you to take a moment, expand the description, and take a look at what's there. Thank you so much, Debra, for your time today. I cannot thank you enough. This has just been incredible. You're doing amazing things. I appreciate your time today. Just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work and for your audience, because this is what we do. We're stronger together. So thank you.
Absolutely. And as always, a big thanks to those of you watching. Big hugs to you. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see you in the next one.